Okay, I thought I would add this to this video. I don't want to dedicate an entire video on this subject because it'll be way too hard to talk about it for a long period of time. But as you guys seen in one of my videos, I talked a little bit about my dad and what happened to him. Um, my dad was 65 years old when he passed away. He became a diabetic in his early 30s. He was a type 2, and then when he got a little bit older, he was a type 1. His entire family was diabetic. I don't have anyone left on my dad's side of the family. His mom died when my dad was 12. She had her leg amputated due to diabetes, and my dad was by her side when she did pass away in the hospital. His dad was diabetic, my grandpa. He died at age, I think he was 77 or 78 back in 2000. I think it was the year 2000 or 2001, one of those that he passed away. He lost all three of his sisters due to diabetes. He did have a set of twin brothers, but they died at birth. My dad was the youngest out of four. He had a 6 bypass in, I think it was 2002, if I'm not forgetting, or if I'm not mistaking. He was actually the very first person to ever have a 6 bypass at Lutheran Hospital here in Fort Wayne. They went in to actually do 4, and they didn't realize how bad his arteries were. They're about 99% blocked. So that was a very long day. He was in surgery for about 10 hours. Let's see, fast forward to 2013. This is my dad. One of my subby friends had this made for me. That was my wedding. I was very, very thin, which at some point I will do a video on why I was so thin, and no, I wasn't anorexic or anything like that. But that is my dad. This picture was taken 3 weeks before my dad almost lost his life. And he had his leg amputated in May of 2013. Or yeah, is it 13? Yeah, 2013. It started out as a blister. And if you're not familiar with diabetes, you really, really got to take care of every little scratch, nick, whatever, because it will get very, very badly infected, which always happened to my dad, even with a paper cut. But anyway, it started out with a little blister on the bottom of his foot. I believe I have a picture. If I do, I'll go ahead and add it right here. Beware, it is very graphic. They tried to save his leg about 5 days, but he became very, very ill. So they could not wait any longer, and my mom gave the okay to amputate his leg. It was his right leg, right below the knee. When my dad woke up from surgery, he reached out for my mom and said, you know, can you fix my leg? It feels like it's asleep. He didn't know he lost his leg. So that was very hard to see that. This is going to be a hard video. Okay. He, about 5 days, I believe, after his surgery, I went up to the hospital every morning. I stayed there all day. I would take Ava to school. I would drop her off at 8 o'clock. Alex and I would go up to the hospital from 8 o'clock until 3 o'clock every single day. Every single day. And when I got up there one day, my mom was packing up his stuff. And I'm like, what's going on? And she goes, your dad's really sick. They're rushing him to the MICU. I'm like, oh my God, I was freaking out. So they put him in a medical coma. So walking into that room, I'm so sorry. Seeing your dad, that's always been this strong, tough guy, and have all of these machines and tubes on him, breathing for him, was one of the hardest thing I ever had to see. I remember after being in his room for a few minutes, his best friend Jerry was in there, And I just kind of slipped out of the room and just leaned against the wall out in the hallway and just fell to my knees. And that was just really hard. And after 3 days, he became more alert. So I would go in there and hold his hand and talk to him. He couldn't open his eyes or talk, but he knew I was there. So he would squeeze my hand. Like I said, he was in the hospital for a total of, I think, 56 days. He was transferred to another hospital for physical therapy, and that's where he stayed till he was able to get up and use a walker. Now, my dad was a big guy, 6'4", over 300 pounds, and he's trying to hop on one leg. And I had to, we encouraged him, and I was so proud of him that he was working so hard. And he was on a lot of medications, and there was one medication he was on, Lyrica. It did help him, but he had such horrible side effects. He was depressed. He was suicidal. He just wasn't my dad, and I begged him not to take that medicine anymore, so he stopped. Fast forward a little bit more, he became more independent. He was in a wheelchair. I still went over there every day. I made him his breakfast, his lunch, because my mom had to get a job to help support my dad and them. And, I would help him do a lot of things and make sure he did his stretches with the bands and strengthen up his arms so he can use the walker. And then after he lost so much weight, he was able to get a prosthetic. So he got that, and within a few months, he outgrew it because he lost more weight, so he had to get fitted with another leg. And he was becoming more of my dad. He was funny. That's where I get my personality, is from my dad. He was always the laugh of the party. He always had jokes, his facial expressions, his laugh. One of the things he would always say, like, we've been getting a lot of rain, and I would tell my little ones, I go, you know what Grandpa would say when it's raining real hard? He'll be like, shh, do you hear that? The grass is growing. When it's real windy out, and he goes, oh, it's a little people warning out, and my kids would be like, what? When people would say, wow, the rain's really coming down, he goes, have you ever seen it go up? He always had a comeback, and a lot of him is inside me. I've always had a personality like how I am. I've always been outgoing, and I love making people laugh and smile. Even if it makes me look stupid, I don't care, because it just brightens my day to see other people smile. My dad was the same way. Fast forward to September of 2014. He was out mowing the grass. He was walking with a cane. He even tried to walk without a cane. I was just so proud. He was my dad, a thinner dad, but he was my dad. I was so happy, and I'm like, yes, he's back. We got over that big hump of him being depressed and, homeward bound, and felt like he was a burden on people, So yeah, my husband and I took him out to lunch, and if I have that picture, I'll post it right here. And that was in September. Fast forward to November 5th. I can't even remember what day it was. I think it was maybe a Wednesday. I was cleaning up the dishes. We had pot roast that night, and I had my cell phone on the counter, and my phone rang, and it said Mom. Now, I should always answer my phone, but I don't. I'm like, oh, God, what does she want? I'm busy. I'll call her later. But something told me to answer it. So I answered it, and all I could hear was screaming and crying. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong? I knew my aunt in Texas was really sick. I thought maybe something happened to her, and she just couldn't get it out. And I'm like, Mom, calm down. What is wrong? What is wrong? And the paramedic got on the phone and they said, we have your dad. He's in full cardiac arrest and you need to get to the hospital right away. I remember dropping the phone. I remember running upstairs to get my shoes. And I kept screaming, no, 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 no. That's all I kept saying. My husband ran after me. He's like, what's wrong? I go, it's my dad. It's my dad. So, he got me to the hospital, and before he even got the car stopped at the ER, I jumped out. I ran to the desk, and I'm leaning over the desk, and I'm like, I need to see my dad. I need to see him before it's too late. Please, I gotta see my dad. And I remember leaning against the wall, going down and just praying to God, please don't take my dad. He has been through so much and he fought so hard. You better not take him. A stranger came up and gave me a tissue and she put her hand on my shoulder and she goes, I'm so sorry. The nurse called me back. I got put in a room. My mom and brother and a couple of friends were in there. And I remember sitting next to my mom. And I said, Mom, what's going on? What happened? And she looked up like she was looking at a ghost. And she just said, he was blue. He was blue. That's all she kept saying. And I looked at my brother, Jeff, and I'm like, what happened? That day, it was, fall. My dad wanted to get the last bit of leaves picked up. So he got on his riding mower. My mom says, I have to run to the mall and exchange a couple of things for Logan. I'll be right back. I have the chili on because my dad was hungry for chili. And she goes, keep your cell phone on you. He's like, yeah, whatever. So she was gone for about an hour. And the neighbor across the street, Rick, seen my dad in the front yard. My dad waved. Rick waved. He gets out of his car, goes inside, opens his garage door within minutes. And that's when my mom pulls up. And my dad's sitting in the driveway, humped over like this, over his riding lawnmower. And my mom just thought he was resting and he was tired. And she goes, Jerry, get up. I'm home. The chili's done. Nothing. And she's like, Jerry. She goes over there and tries to pull him up. And from the chest up, he was completely blue. At this time, the neighbor across the street, Rick, heard my mom's cry out for help. He runs over there. Now, Rick is a small guy, and my dad, is a big guy. He was trying to do CPR on my dad while he was on the lawnmower. I remember hearing sirens that day, but never thought it was for my dad. After being in that room for about 30 minutes, the doctor and a couple other people came in with them, and they explained what they were doing to my dad. And they said that his heart was too weak. They couldn't bring him back. And I remember my ears started ringing after I heard that. And I leaned over to hug my mom that was on my right. And on the left of me was my husband. And I just looked at him like a deer in headlights. I'm like, did I just hear that my dad passed away? And I remember standing up and I hugged my husband. And my sister-in-law was right there. And I remember her saying, hold on to her. And I felt the worst pain in my chest. And I never, ever in my life have I ever cried that hard, ever. They said that they were going to clean up things and then we can go back
to say bye. I did not want to go back there. I did not want to see my dad dead on a table. But my brother said, you need to go back there and see Dad. I'm like, Jeff, please don't make me go. I don't want to see Dad that way. But he insists that I went back. So my husband was next to me. We go through the double doors, and then I come to my dad's room. I just remember taking a deep breath, and I opened the door. My dad still had a tube in his mouth. My mom was on the left of him, and she kept stroking his hair and kept saying, Jerry, please wake up. Open your eyes, Jerry. Open your eyes. I walked to my dad, and I just laid on top of him, and I kept saying, I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad. And then I stood up and I looked right at him, and I said, I'll see you in the spring. That's what my dad would always say when you would say bye to him. Be like, bye, Dad. Bye, Grandpa. See you in the spring. That's what he would always say. And I remember walking out of the room, and after being there for a couple hours, they could not get my mom away from him. It took about 7 hours to get my mom out of his room so they could move him. And when they pulled her out of the room, my mom collapsed. She was admitted to the hospital and was diagnosed with broken heart syndrome. The bottom of her heart stopped working. So not only did I lose my dad that day, I lost part of my mom that day. She was in the hospital for 2 days. And, you know what's going on? 5 years. And my mom's never been the same. We always talk about Dad. We laugh, we cry. It's just very hard to lose a loved one. Everyone grieves differently. Some people, it's easier for them to move on, somewhat forget. Me? Every day, I think of my dad. I always talk to my dad. I look up at the sky every day and say, good morning, Dad. Night, Dad. I miss you, Dad. I wish you could be here, Dad, to see your grandson playing baseball, your granddaughter cheering. He didn't get to see that. So yeah, it's hard. So don't think that there's a right or wrong way to grieve of losing a loved one, because there isn't. It's really hard. But with time, you start accepting it. But when I really, really, really think about that day, that's why I do this. It's very hard to deal with. I don't cry all the time when I talk about my dad. I laugh a lot when I talk about my dad or think about him. There's just, when you lose someone, like, colors are different. Objects seem different. Music has more of a meaning. Certain sounds you don't really pay attention to until you lose someone. Like a cardinal. I really never paid attention to cardinals until I lost my dad. So my message to you is don't think there's a right or wrong way to grieve. You grieve the way you want to grieve. Don't let anyone else tell you different. Don't let anyone tell you it's been this long. It's been 10 years, 20 years. You know, why are you still upset? Accept it. I have accepted it. There's no choice. You have to accept it. But that doesn't mean I'm not supposed to cry. Because that's one of the weaknesses I have is when I talk about my dad. My dad and I were very close. I was a daddy's little girl. I was the only girl. I was the youngest out of 3. My dad was always there for me. So was my mom. And I was always there for my dad. And the very first time I ever seen my dad cry was at his dad's funeral. And they started playing Amazing Grace. And that's the first time I ever seen my dad cry. And I said, if I ever have another baby, and it's a girl, her name is going to be Grace. That's how my third daughter became Grace. The night before my dad had heart surgery, I went to his house to give him a hug. And when I gave him a hug, he started to cry. And he said, Jenny, I am so scared. I knew my dad was so scared of dying. And knowing how he died, and he was alone, is hard to picture that he was doing so good. He struggled so hard and he worked so hard. And what's funny is that when you lose someone, you go through all these phases. Like you're really sad. And then you get really angry. Like, why? Why did you take my dad? Why did you put him through all that? Why did you give him a bad heart? Why did you, he had kidney disease. Why did you do all this to my dad? Why did you take his leg and then turn around and he dies? Why? I get so angry when I think about that. You're sad, you're angry, you're confused, you're lost. All these emotions. And it's so tough at the beginning, I know. But like I said, with time, it gets a little bit easier. The pain doesn't go away. At least for me, it doesn't. Whenever I walk into my mom's new home, I always look at my dad's chair. That's where my dad would always sit. It's like, God, if I could just see him just one more time. If I could just tell him I love him one more time, I think I would feel much better. But knowing that I wasn't there to say bye, I wasn't there to help him. And I know he was afraid. I know he was afraid. And that just eats me up. So over time, I was just like, I really want to do something for my dad. In memory of my dad. And I'm like, I just don't know what I want to do. So on the 1-year anniversary, of the passing of my dad, I got this tattoo. It's kind of hard to see, but it says, "See you in the spring," with a dove going up to heaven. So because I wasn't able to say our last goodbye, when you see me wave bye, it's part of my dad saying bye as well. So, sorry for the long video. Sorry for the tears. Talking about my dad and one other thing in life that has happened to me are two very hard things to talk about and to deal with. And I know last year I promised you my story. And I'm working on it. Just know that miracles do happen. They're everywhere. Just believe. Just always have faith over fear. It will be okay. I thank you all for watching. And just remember, be you. Don't let anyone tell you who to be or how to be, how to grieve, how to be happy. Just be you. Choose faith over fear. Bye, guys. Keep smiling.
I love you.
I love you too.
Oh.
Bye, Grandpa. See you in the spring.
See you in the spring.
Too bad it's spring now. He said I will always be that angel for you.
See if I can make it to the car without crashing down the hill. Or would you put that away?
Bye, dinner was good.
God.
Goodbye, Grandma. Bye, love you.
Bye, Matt.
Huh?
See ya. Thanks for dinner.
See ya, thanks for dinner. It was good.
See ya.
All right, bye.
Love
Love you.
Ooh, you got
You're
scratchy
not going.
stuff on your face. Ooh, perfectly finished.
Is the door unlocked, woman?
Bye, I love you. Have a good
Sam,
day.
open keep the door open for Grandpa.
This? Grandma's gonna get a bigger one made for myself.
Oh,
Is this the only picture? I'll get one made for your mom.
Keep it open.
Bye.
the light there?
I gotta get my
Green
sheet.
and red.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Oh.
Hey, he's speed walking.
It's been so cold. Oh, my car turned off. Wait,
Okay, bye, Grandma.
bye, I love you.
Love you too.
Oh, man.
Well, it only runs about 3 minutes.
Huh? Oh, yep.